Hey everyone, welcome back to Portal of Wisdom. I'm back today with another story for you. So if you are new to the channel, like and subscribe and click that little post notification bell so you get alerted when I post new videos. And now on to today's topic. Today we are going to tell the story of Soldier's Lost Vein of Gold. And this story comes from a couple of different sources, including Desert Magazine in 1945. So in 1870, General George Stoneman had a military camp southeast of the Superstition Mountains in central Arizona. This location was known as Camp Picket Post, and today would be a few miles due west of Superior, Arizona. This was during the Apache Wars, and General Stoneman wanted a better route into the Pinal Mountains to the Apache strongholds in the mountains. So they ordered a construction of a road from Camp Picket Post into the Pinal Mountains, and this road became known as the Stoneman Grade, and many of the soldiers were tasked with constructing this road. During the construction, a soldier by the name of Sullivan, he discovered some dark rocks that felt pretty heavy for their size, and he also found that they flattened out nicely when struck with a hammer. So he found them very unusual and unique, and he held on to a few of them. And he didn't tell any of his fellow soldiers about these unique rocks either. It appears that he was the only one that noticed them or was spending a little bit of time hammering them and messing with them. So it seems after a while, though, that he figured out that these dark rocks were actually nugget silver. Soon after his military assignment ended, he went to work near the Gila River on a ranch owned by Charles Mason. Now that he knew that they were nugget silver, he did show off these rocks to quite a few people. But he would never tell anyone where he got them. I believe I also saw another source saying that Charles Mason's name was Charles G. Mason, and he may have also went by George. So I think there's a little bit of detail there. He may have gone by Charles, he may have gone by George. Another account that I saw stated him as George Mason. But anyhow, Sullivan's boss was a Mr. Mason, and he really wanted to know where this nugget silver came from, and Sullivan wouldn't tell him. So Mr. Mason knew Sullivan's prior history and knew that he was stationed at Camp Picket Post, and he figured that it was likely somewhere around there that he found this silver. So Mason rounded up a search party to go search this area for the silver, and the party consisted of Mason, Benjamin Reagan, Isaac Copeland, William Long, and another friend. And as they were exploring and looking for this nugget silver, apparently they were north of Camp Picket Post, somewhere along the Stoneman Grade. And it was said to be March 21st of 1875, and the party was attacked by Apaches, and their unnamed friend did not survive. And I don't know why he's not named, I guess because he wasn't part of the later discovery, so he was part of the initial search party. But when this happened, it was said that it happened near the summit of Stoneman Grade, and they buried their friend there. But during the burial and the time it took to do that, one of the mules had strayed. And so Copeland, he went to find the mule. He wanted to figure out where he went, and he was sent, I guess, with the task to bring the mule back. And he did find the mule, and he found the mule near the base of Stoneman Grade. But as he found the mule, he also found an unusual rock outcropping. Once he looked at it a little closer, he noticed markings that were apparently left by Sullivan. And it appears they realized at this time that this was a vein of silver. So the group initially operated a mine at this location, and in June of 1876, Copeland then sold his share to Mason, and within a few months, Long sold his interest to Reagan. Now Mason and Reagan owned all of the shares entirely, and it had been, I guess it had required them to pay out their two friends about $80,000 to their partners to buy them out. So at that point, Mason and Reagan owned everything, and later on it is stated that they sold their interest to James Barney for $250,000 and $300,000 respectively. So operations at this Silver King mine went on until 1888. Over $6 million worth of silver was mined here during that time, and that was prices from 1875 to 1888 values. So a significant amount of silver was pulled out of this mine. And there are mining wagon ruts that are still visible, that are worn pretty deeply into the rock by the wagons from the Silver King mine that were then trucking wagon loads of ore to be processed, I believe, down closer to the river. I believe they had a processing spot down there. And then I think the trains also came through there too. So anyhow, this is still visible just south of Highway 60, just a little west of Superior. And I've been there, and it's really cool to see these wagon ruts that are quite a few inches deep into the rock from so many back and forth trips of these wagons full of ore. Kind of reminds you of when you would hear stories of the Oregon Trail and how deep the wagon ruts would be in places. And this is still somewhere that you can visit and see it. It's not too far, maybe might have been a couple hundred yards south of the highway. You got to go in the right spot, but it can be found on on Google Maps, and it's not too hard to get there. But this is not the entire story. This is just the first part of the story. So there's a whole other story involving Mason and the Silver King mine before he sold his interest. And this part also comes out of the Desert Magazine January 1945 issue. So while Mason was still a part owner of the mine around late 1875 or likely sometime in 1876, two French-Canadian soldiers that had been stationed at Fort McDowell northeast of Phoenix were nearing the end of their enlistments, and it appears by the end of 1875 they were done with their enlistments. So they had been hearing about the Silver King mine, and they figured it would be a good place to try to find their next jobs. Plus, they were intrigued by the sensational stories of the boomtown mining camps and the great riches at these mines, and figured it would be a good place to get a job. So they left Fort McDowell and they headed southeast to the Mormon Flat crossing of the Salt River. And from here, the Desert Magazine article by Barry Storm states the next directions that they took. Now, I am going to read those verbatim out of the article. Quote, hiking due southeast from the Mormon Flat crossing on the Salt River, they entered the mountains between Cahatan and LaBarge Creeks, followed the trail past the prehistoric Indian ruins, now known as Garden Valley, over Black Mesa to West Boulder Canyon, a quarter mile above its mouth. crossed the low ridge that separates East and West Boulder Canyons at this point, and proceeded on up East Boulder Canyon toward Weaver's Needle, which now was in plain sight. Then they turned east on the trail to go through the low pass below the southern slopes of the Black-Topped Mountain, which separates East Boulder and Needle Canyons, a scant half a mile apart. Somewhere in this region, they flushed a deer, fired at it at least once with their .50 caliber Spencer repeaters, Army issued, and in the resulting chase came upon a partly exposed, reddish vein about a foot thick halfway up a black-topped hill. End quote. So at this point, the two men chipped off a few pieces of this nice-looking rock ore as a souvenir. And a few days later, they applied for jobs with the mining foreman, Jack Frazier, at the Silver King mine. They were both hired, and after that, they started working in the mine for a while, and they had noticed that the ore that they were mining was also dark and heavy and metallic and had unusual color to it, just like their reddish rock specimens that they found in the Superstition Mountains. So they mustered up the courage to ask the mine foreman for his opinion on their specimens that they pulled out of the Superstitions. When Frazier saw the specimens, he called for the mine superintendent, who happened to be Mr. Mason. And this is the same Mr. Mason we were discussing earlier. So Mason looked at the samples and he concluded that they did contain a lot of gold. From those few samples that the ex-soldiers had, it was determined that they were worth more than $400 or more than $500 in gold. And the mine placed that much credit on the mine commissary books for them to purchase things with. And at this point, Mason probably remembered another ex-soldier, Sullivan, that had worked for him in the past, that also had a great discovery. And at this point, Mason offered to go into a partnership with the French-Canadian ex-soldiers. So Mason said that he would outfit them from the mine commissary so they could return to the Superstitions and they could stake a mining claim. In the meantime, Mason would help them start their process of becoming U.S. citizens and would vouch for them and help them obtain their naturalization paperwork. They would need this to file a legal claim. So they all agreed, and the two men set off alone back into the Superstitions, and apparently Mason started some of the paperwork and he didn't go with them. Unknown at the time that these two men took off, there was another man named Smith, a peg-legged gambler fellow and fellow miner at the mine, that had been following them back into the mountains as they tried to backtrack to their discovery site. The two French Canadians were never seen again alive. A few weeks later, their remains were found in a ranch pasture owned by the Quarter Circle U Ranch. They were ID'd by their belongings from the mine commissary. They had both been shot ambush style. The locals believed that it was Pegleg Smith who was responsible, as he had disappeared from the mining camp at relatively the same time. It was said that later on, Pegleg Smith did turn up in Alaska and he was cashing in some reddish gold ore. So it appears that he followed the men to the location and had led them or followed them or whatever to their deaths afterwards. We don't know exactly how they ended up in that particular pasture. So a few years later, Pegleg Smith had reached out by mail to a couple of former friends at the Silver King mining camp, and he wanted them to go into the Superstitions and stake out a claim for a 1/2 interest in this mine, this location that he knew about. and he would then furnish them with the details. But no one took him up on the offer, and Smith was never heard from again. So there were a couple other people that were mentioned in the article that stated that they knew where the location of the gold was, but they either never lived to go find it or they never showed up with any ore showing that they were telling the truth. So that is the story of the soldier's lost vein of gold and a few details of the Silver King mine. I'm going to add a couple more things to that story. I know when we were talking about Pegleg Smith, there is another famous Pegleg Smith that's a different Pegleg Smith that had already passed on by the time of this story, and he is associated with a lost gold mine, and I probably will eventually do a story on him too. So these are two different Pegleg Smiths. Obviously, Smith is a fairly common last name, and a lot of people, if they were missing a leg or a part of a leg, that was a pretty common nickname back in those days. So anyhow, and the other thing I wanted to clarify too, when it comes to this Pegleg Smith in the story with the two soldiers, of course, people do believe that he did away with the two soldiers. They just don't know if he did it shortly after he was led to the location of the gold, or whether he made note of it and then followed the two soldiers back out of the mountains once they had found the location, and if he did away with them there in that pasture where they were found. It seems maybe more likely like something like that may have happened so that he didn't have to carry a couple of bodies out of the Superstition Mountains. He may have followed them to a less conspicuous place away from where he was going to be working a potential find. The other obvious thing that comes to mind when it comes to this story, I'm sure a lot of people have probably thought about this as they're listening to the story, is the possible close proximity to the Lost Dutchman treasure. We all know that is supposed to be somewhere in the Superstition Mountains, and Weaver's Needle is a location that is mentioned in a lot of the stories as one of the waypoints. So it does seem like this could be a possibility for the location of the Lost Dutchman mine. The Lost Dutchman mine was, I guess, Jacob Waltz was the Lost Dutch, or was the Dutchman. So he supposedly found that mine at some point in the 1870s, and of course these two soldiers are coming through the Superstition Mountains, finding this location in the mid-1870s, so we really don't know if this location that they found and then led Pegleg back to, and he mined some ore off of it, and then he disappeared. We don't know if a year or two later if Jacob Waltz finds this same location, and if this happens to be, the same location, or if it just happens to be in an area of the Superstition Mountains where there's a couple of possible gold veins or whatever the situation is. But I'm sure a lot of people probably picked up on that and probably felt that that particular location could be somewhat close to, or maybe the same as, the Lost Dutchman location. And speaking of the Lost Dutchman, that lost mine, it might be time for me to revisit that one. I did a story about that in the very early stages of my channel when I was doing a lot of other stuff too. Wasn't just doing specifically lost treasures and stuff like that, that now this channel has kind of migrated towards that direction, and I don't do any of the other interesting stuff that I've done before. Hey everyone, thanks for listening this far. If you made it this far, I do have an announcement for you. on our channel, Portal of Wisdom, we are going to start doing more live chats and some premieres, so you are able to interact with me here through the comments. So if you're not aware of how a premiere works, if it happens to be a half-hour video, you'll get an alert about a half hour before it goes live. And while it plays for that first half hour, I will be live in the comments. So if you want to leave a comment or interact with other listeners to the channel and to the video, you can do that, and we can all interact and be a little more interactive. And the live chats will allow the same thing. We can get on and just chat about whatever we feel like talking about. Some of the different topics on the channel or various other things. I can let you know things about myself or producing videos and some processes and things like that, and it'll give everyone an opportunity to kind of chat and hang out, and it'll give people on either of those also an opportunity to leave a super chat, which will allow you to donate a few dollars to the channel and make a comment or whatever that can also get read during the live chats or whatever. And so that's also an opportunity if you wanted to support the channel. And coming soon, we will also have a membership level that will give you access to some more discussion through the Discord server that we're getting set up for a lot of fans of the channel, so that people can chat and talk at anytime amongst each other, and should be a lot of fun. I believe the membership level, it'd probably just be a few dollars a month if someone wants to do that. And these things are mainly just to help support the channel, since we only make a few dollars a month on it, and it is very time and labor intensive putting these videos together, doing the research, and then a lot of them require the writing of a script to make sure you don't leave out important details, and then you gotta read and record the audio and then put it to slides in a whole nother program, and a lot of stuff goes into it. So anyhow, I figure we have a big enough community now that's starting where it should start to be a lot more fun to interact with people, and we've built to this point, so it's kind of a nice idea, I think, to be able to get together for more discussion amongst the channel watchers and subscribers and people like that. So anyhow, watch for those things. Eventually here there'll be a join button on the main page where you can join and become a channel member, and in a case like that, then your name does appear different in the live chat, so people know that you're a member, and we'll make sure that those comments also get read during the live chats too. We'll do our best to read all the comments we can, but if it gets pretty busy like some live chats out there, it can get obviously very fun, but it can be a little bit difficult to read everybody's comments. But that is some of the upcoming things we have coming that we want to make you aware of. So if you're a fan of the channel and you think you'd like more interaction with other fans of the channel and with us here, then it would be, I think, a lot of fun. So watch for those things, and if you have questions about that, you can, I guess, let us know, or we'll have a live chat probably coming here very soon. Thank you.